Hi, Ren.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, sorry I couldn't speak today much. I'm actually having a sore throat due to viral.
Ah, it's okay. No worries.
Just a thing, Aaron, before we start. Last week, sorry, I posted a blog on Medium about what we spoke about channels. Aaron, are you speaking? You are speaking on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me a second. I have to restart Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's better.
Mm,
I saw your blog, Akor.
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That was really
So I
cool.
Yeah, so I got few queries from that blog regarding the Go group. So I thought it would be appropriate for me to pass it to you.
Oh, of course. Yeah, if people want to reach out, they
Yeah.
can uh, they can DM me on the Go for Slack. That's probably the best way.
Yeah. So
I can tell them about it.
most of the queries were like how means efficient it is, because it's really difficult for everyone to track what's going on the Google Doc.
Okay.
So
Um,
that was one of the things that I received, means they were unable to find most of what was discussed in the past. Means they have to scroll, they cannot filter date wise, or there were not any sort of information what was discussed. Means we had discussed few things in the past, right? But
okay.
there is no appropriate link posted what was discussed during those period of frame of time. So it would be
Okay.
better if they can find, because for new people they want to join only if they know they can be beneficial in any way. So they just
Sure.
wanted to check what kind of content people go through and over our Go group. For everyone it was not appropriate to go through entire video length section.
Okay, so they are aware though of the that there are recordings, but you're saying they just didn't have time to go through it.
Yeah, so I redirected them to that Go our video link playlist,
Yeah.
but it was just that they were not aware much. They don't want to go through entire section of 1.1 hour and 1.5 hour to find
Okay.
out the useful content out of it.
Got it. Okay. I think we might have a way to just record short summaries of what was talked about in each meeting.
Yeah.
That might, if there were maybe two or three sentences or bullet points about each item we went through, that might help. What do you think?
Yeah, that is also one case. And another thing I'm thinking of, it's kind of a organic promotion from our side can be also helpful. Like we can have our own Medium blog for Go study group where we can have a summary of what has been discussed from each and what are the important point that has been discussed. And if someone is presenting, they can post a link, and then it sort of serve the purpose of both as a organic promotion, that also because we can post it on the Twitter, because Google Doc does not serve as a, you cannot send it over the Twitter link and what was discussed and all those things in short.
Okay. I love that. I took a note for that, and I'll create the Medium blog, and then I'll add folks as admins on the blog so that we can all take turns writing summaries and so forth.
Yeah,
That's a
sure.
great
So
idea.
yeah. So
Uh,
that was basically the thing. I had 4 or 5 people who before connecting to our group just pinged me on Twitter and asked me what kind of content do, because uh, I am not aware, means that blog post is, means how much value my content is, unless and until they were saying that this is something they really wanted to know, and I have got into great depth. So it served as a confidence booster also from my side to go
Okay.
in more details about other topics.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I'll create that. And then, yeah, like I said, we'll take some turns writing down summaries of each meeting, and we might have more we can share, because I know you made a blog or a blog post, excuse me, and there's plenty of other content we can write down. So that's awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, Ankur.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's get started. I am going to share my screen really quickly so I can do just a quick mention with some administrative stuff. And then Dinesh, are you here? Yeah, you're here.
Yep.
So we'll get into your item about testing handler functions in like 2 minutes.
Sure.
So I just wanted to mention something really quickly. Let me share my screen really quick. Oh boy. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, so we have a GitHub organization, GitHub/Go study group, each letter is separated by hyphen. And there is this thing called, there's a repo called Agenda API. The Agenda API is software that I'm building, and I'm screencasting the whole thing. And it's going to eventually take the place of the Google Doc for planning out our agenda and submitting things that we want to see on the agenda for next week or the week after or so forth. So I'll provide more detail about where I'm screencasting this. We might do some screencasting for this if we have time on certain weeks to build this thing out. And then obviously I'll show sort of what my plan is for how we're going to use this thing in the future as well. So again, it's just going to take the place of the Google Doc functionality for planning out the agenda. We'll probably still have the Google Doc sort of when we transition over, but I think this will make things a lot easier for us. Does anyone have questions about that before we move on?
Hi, my name is Robert Bellamy. I did have, this is my first time, so thank you for putting this together. One thing that's great about GitHub is that we can sort of collaborate asynchronously in issues.
Okay. I think the Go Study Group India does that, so maybe we could explore that as well. What do you think, Robert?
Sounds great to me.
Okay. So let's explore that. Maybe I can write something up and we can just all see what we think. Take a note for that really quick. On agenda via GitHub issues. Okay. So I am going to stop screen sharing here. And so before we move on, is there anyone here that's new that wants to introduce themselves? I know, Robert, you are. Anybody else?
I'm new.
How's it going?
Hey, I'm Tom. I'm from the UK. I'm a relatively new Go programmer. I'm a relatively new programmer in general. I'm just finishing up my PhD, but I'm kind of switching careers a little bit to try and get into programming.
Cool. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So we do this, you probably know, I'll just repeat it real quick. We do this every week, Thursday at 10 a.m. US Pacific time. And if this time zone doesn't work great for you, there is an India time zone one as well. And we are always open to new Go study groups. If you're up for starting one up in your time zone, that is totally cool, and we'll give you all the support you need to do that. But obviously, you're welcome here anytime.
Awesome. It'd be worth exploring. I'm UK based, but this
Right.
isn't a bad time for me. 6 p.m. So
Okay, right on. Cool. Anybody else new that wants to introduce themselves?
Hi, it's Vian.
Hi.
Okay, I'm from India.
Cool.
Oh, okay. I'm also doing software for the last 2 years. I've been mainly doing Python and slowly getting into Go. So that's all.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And
Thank you.
Vian, are you aware of the Go Study group in India as well?
Yeah, I just joined that session 1 hour ago.
Cool. Yeah, you're always welcome here, and you're always welcome there. We love to have you here if you want to come any week or all weeks. It's totally good.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And if you need help, I can put you in touch with the Go Study Group India organizers if you'd like as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. Anybody else new wants to introduce themselves?
I'm
Michael.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Hey.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I've been to the past few of them. I don't remember if I introduced myself. I'm Ben. Thank you guys for doing this. I'm a pretty new Go programmer myself.
Cool. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, I'm Philip. I go by Epic, based in Uganda. And I started Go like a couple of months back. I decided to take a deep dive. I threw away all my code base and I'm trying to run Go in production. It's not so nice, but I'm getting a hang of it the hard way.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe sometime in a study group, you could show or talk about some of your struggles and successes running Go in production. That'd be really cool.
Great. I'll be looking forward to doing that. Maybe not
Awesome.
this week, but maybe next week.
Okay.
Right.
Epic, if you can hit me up on Slack, we can schedule you, and I'll put my Slack into the Zoom chat. You can just
Great.
DM me on Slack.
Great.
Another
Thank
thought is, hi, VN, welcome, or I'm sorry, Epic. Another thought is that in the Slack chat, if you have those questions, feel free to ask them. And, and I'm sure there's lots of people here that would love to hear about it and help if you don't want to talk about it at one of these forums. So it's really your choice.
Great. That's good to hear. Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else wants to introduce themselves?
Hey, I'll introduce myself real quick. I've come to the past couple of these Zooms, and yeah, I'm relatively new to Go. I work at DigitalOcean, and they use it a lot there. And I started using Go about like a little over a year ago. I just threw myself into like some open source projects to try to like learn. So I figured it would be the best way to do that. So like Go, GitHub, and Kubernetes. And then I started working at DigitalOcean. So I'm really trying to get like a deep dive and learn more about it.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Welcome again. I've seen you at least last week, but I think I'm really glad you're here. So thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? All right.
Michael.
Oh. Hey, Michael.
I'm from Brazil, and I am.
Welcome.
I have been teaching myself to code for about 3.5 years. I started with the JavaScript stack, basically Node, and I'm really digging learning Go. It's been fantastic. Thanks very much, guys.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Cool. So I'll throw this out there. I know we have a bunch of different time zones here. I'll just repeat that. That's my wife. I'll just repeat that if folks have other time zones, and if this is either not convenient or they have other folks in those time zones that it's not convenient for them, or they just want to start up another study group for whatever reason, we will provide all the support that you need to start that up, and we'll help you market it and do the agenda and whatever else you need. So just hit me up and I'll get you going. And obviously, if you do that, you're still welcome here anytime, whatever you decide. So that is all my administrivia, and let's get into doing stuff. So Dinesh, I know you have some idea on what you want to talk about, so I'm going to hand it over to you and take it away.
Sure, thank you. So quick introduction about myself. I'm Dinesh. I'm part of the Golang community Bangalore. As I said, like we also started Go Study Group, very similar in class. And also I've been working in Golang for the past 2 years. Have a work experience of 4 years. So today I'll talk about HTTP handlers. Like I mean, not especially the handler. I think last session they've covered it very well. So this session will focus on testing the handlers part. I will share my screen and just let me know whether you're able to see the screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Cool, cool. Is the font visible?
Can you make it just a little bigger?
Yeah, is it better?
Perfect.
Looks great from here.
Cool. So let me just hide video. Okay, so we'll start off with a very basic thing. What we're going to cover is we'll just quickly look at a handler syntax, and then we'll see multiple ways of testing the handler. What I mean by that is you would want to test it in a different way, as in one is the code is in the same package and you have the access to the function or the handler, and then you can call it as a function. And the second part is where you have some external service inside the handler. That is the usual case with any APIs. We'll see how to mock that and then test it as part of the handler. I have two set of code, one to explain the handler func and the other one to explain the handler. I'll show you the code and walk you through just to set the context for the beginner. And also we'll quickly look at the testify mock. That is a very nice library for you to mock the responses based on the request. You can actually set custom request, and then based on it, you can mock it. And then finally, we will have an integration test, and then we'll take questions to it. So at any time, like once I finish one thing, just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try to walk you through it one by one. Cool. So let's start with a ping handler. For any service, we want to have health checks, like or even HA proxy or any other health mechanism dashboard to show. We will generally have a ping handler, which just responds with pong so that you know that, okay, your server is up and running. So we'll quickly look at the contract. So this is basically a function, which is actually handler func. So you don't necessarily need to have a struct and have methods on it, but rather a function with 2 arguments is sufficient enough for returning a proper HTTP handler. So the first one is a response writer. This is the interface which you use to write a header, and you also use to write a body, and you also use it to, there's one more function, write header, write body, and what was first function? Sorry. Yeah, you can list a list of headers.
It has
also.
3 only.
Yeah, yeah. So the second part is a request. So the request actually has the body and the method name and other form values and query params, all the stuff you can extract it out. So this is basically the major part which covers what is your request. And the second part is the response writer. You use it to write it. So in this case, we have a write and then we just write the string, which is a byte array of form. That's it. So I'll not dive into how to run it and all, probably at the end we can have it. So this is the basic HTTP handler func. So just to verify what is HTTP handler func, we can check this here. So the HTTP by default gives you functions, so which also mentions the contract have to be the same. And handler func also gives you one more thing, which is actually serve HTTP, which makes it a handler. I think this is all covered in the previous bit. So let's go to the first test. We have a handler test. So the way we create a request is by calling HTTP new request. And then what we have here is we can say, hey, what is the method and what is the URL you're calling and what is the body. And then if you notice, the package between the ping and the package of the test is actually same. So both are main in this case. So I directly have access to the ping function. So which basically means I can call ping directly. I'll just stop this. Yeah, okay, cool. So I can directly call ping function with my custom writer and also a request. So now what we are doing is I'm making a new HTTP request and then I'm having a URL body.
Hey, Dinesh,
doesn't matter.
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
When you said the writer, can you explain sort of what is that writer you're talking about?
Okay, cool. So when I said writer, it's actually like the way we write the response to the request. So when we make a request curl to HTTP localhost 8080 ping, you obviously want to see the response. And generally in other languages also, you have a custom way to write it in a similar way. If we have a response writer, we write some string to it, which is actually returned in the body of the request. I can quickly show the terminal to clarify it better. So I have the handler, and then let's just make a request. Curl HTTP local host 8080/ping. So I made a request to ping. What we saw here with Pong is the writer. And let's just go a bit one more. So write header http.status, let's say font. So let's just rebuild the code and run it. Yeah. So if you notice earlier, we got the request 200. And then here we get request 302. I mean, you guys would have used Postman or anything, which is very similar. So what we can control is the body, what is the data which is going out, and also the headers, which actually tells you whether it is application JSON or text, and also the header values, which is actually, in this case, status code also matters, which is 302 or 200. You have control on these three, which is the major chunk of what you will do with the request. You do some business logic on top of the request, and then you finally respond with, hey, I've created an order, or service unavailable, or some try it again later. Like you will have a custom logic, and based on the response, you have clients doing something. So yeah, writer is basically that piece in the HTTP handler sense. I hope.
So if I do a write, can I do another write? Like if I want to do Pong like twice or something, can I do w.write and then another?
As far as I remember, I think it closes the stream, so we don't even need to. That's why in the first time we didn't have the header, it automatically writes the 200. But we can just quickly verify it. Let's see what is the state, because mostly we've used it in a like single time, and then you write status code and then you return it. Let's just verify. Yeah, so I can actually write it. It just goes on, but I think the writer writes on the top. But generally, I haven't used it in this way. We write the whole struct and then we serialize it as JSON. So this also works.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for explaining.
Could I make a small recommendation while you're doing this brief?
Sure.
Tack a \r\n on the end of your write commands, on the write end, so it adheres to just the appropriate new lines. And then when you execute it, you won't have to deal with your what do you call it? Your shell prompt, being scooted over and trying to go backwards and stuff. Anyways, just a thought.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. That works. So it's just the same order. Yeah, I think Shell just screwed it up. So we have the Pong and we have the one form, which is in the same order as it's written. But as I said, like we generally used to have a struct, specific custom struct. And then we use JSON Marshall, and then we write the whole response in one chunk. That is the more, that's the more of the use we have used in application JSON format. Yeah. So with that, setting the context on handler and writing a Pong, we can go into the test. So the first piece of the test is direct, as we saw. So let's just create it. So if you notice, again, to just set the context, so this was an interface. This Ping took a W, which is actually a response writer that had 3 methods, and HTTP test has a nice mock. It's not exactly a mock, but a custom implementation where you can see what is the values which was written into it. If we didn't have the recorder, we would end up writing our own struct with all these 3 methods othering to the interface. Then we would have to see, hey, what was the status code written and what is the body written? We could actually store it in memory and then check it as well. But HTTP test has a nice recorder which gives you the very same ability. So we can quickly check the recorder as well. So if you see write header, they just store it internally so that later you can access it as part of the verification part. So yeah, so let's not go into the HTTP test internals, but rather let's I'll stick to the test and then the way of writing test, and then if we have time, probably we can dig in deeper as well. So we have the setup and we have the test actually calling the ping function, and then finally we have the assertions. So here I'm passing the recorder and the request, and I'm verifying whether my status code is 200, which is actually w.code, which it stored when it actually performed the function. And then W body string gives you whatever the string which was written into the particular struct, which in this case it's recorder. So let's just change the value and then we can run the test so that we know it's failing. So Pong1, I've changed the response, just kill this. Go test, I can run fine. Yeah, so if you notice, we expect Pong from the actual response, but it actually responded with Pong1. And this assertion is just based on Testify library. It has a very nice functions. You guys should really check it out. So yeah, so in this case, let me just change it back and then let me try it again. That works. So this is in a very basic level. In fact, what to add on, this doesn't matter at all. What we are testing here is not the URL and not the actual method type, but rather the functionality of the handler. So which means even if I change the function and the URL, it is still gonna pass. Yep. So that is to do with the directly testing the HTTP handler form directly from the test. And now we can actually go and look into a HTTP handler, which has a external sort of dependency. And then you would obviously call it and then change the values like that. So this is the base setup. Like if you have any questions, shoot. We are actually building up on top of this. So if there is any questions, just let me know now.
Maybe I have a question.
Yeah.
I see you're using Testify.
Yeah.
And then I was just asking because I think Okay, I just wanted to find out why you chose Testify for your tests.
Okay, so there are even internally, like Golang itself, you can use expect and then write test. But Testify have been in wide use of the community, and the whole reason is it's not just here. When I explain mock, it will be more evident. In this case, if let's say if I want to write a mock saying, hey, on any request, if I have to return an error, and based on that I have to write a error code, it becomes harder to write it for every edge cases. So what I basically mean is, let's say you're depending on some service, and then if this service has value, let's say it takes an integer as an argument, and if it takes 1, you return success, and if it takes, let's say, value 2, you return failure. So what you end up writing is, you will write 2 structs, 1 for success and 1 for failure, and then depending on the test, you will inject the appropriate in your own implementation of the struct matching the interface. Over the time, if the test cases becomes really huge, you cannot handle it. The code becomes really bloated. But rather, what Testify, as part of Testify, like just part of it is mock, where you can say, hey, on runtime, on receiving this particular argument, you can return these values. So it has nice helper functions. But basically, in this context, I would say, hey, mock is the one thing which tells you. And also, you can say, this is very similar to other languages saying, hey, assert.equal, like similar to Java, JUnit, or any other language. So it's pretty famous, but I think we can dive into deeper, like require, Testify equal, and then comparing different objects. And also, when I run the test, you will be able to see, hey, the functions are not called, or the method arguments are different. The library gives you much more ability to write tests and then debug it than writing our own custom thing. I can show in the next test also, but I think there would be other alternatives as well. I haven't explored. We majorly use Testify. I hope that answers. With that, I can move on to the next piece of code. Okay, cool. So let's say very similar to Ping, but this particular Ping is doing some more brilliant things to your service. Because when you say your service is up, it's not just your service, but rather your cache, which is Redis, or it could be a Postgres, or it could be your very closely tied any other dependent services. You could do much more to say, hey, whether the service is, healthy or not. So in that context, let's just say, hey, this is a service. As part of the service, I'm also checking whether the DB is available. Okay. So let's not worry about the internals of DB, how we're going to query it and all. Like there are some SQLX DB PQ libraries, which has a nice ping method. But rather in this handler perspective, what we will need is, I need an external dependency, which is basically having a checker function. And then what it's going to do is, this interface is having a ping, and then it's going to return error. That's it. So it doesn't matter what component it is. I'm just naming it DB, but rather you can have 20 different components, slice of the checker, and then you can return whether the service is up or not. So in this case, interface is ping, which returns an error. Ping doesn't take any arguments, returns an error. And then this is the actual handler in this case. Earlier, we were having handler func. In case of handler func, you would have to write a closure to take the service. But in this case, I'm actually using it inside the struct. It's actually part of the struct. So in case of HTTP handler, we saw that HTTP handler func itself adds a nice feature of a serve HTTP. So if it's a particular handler, right, you have to have serve HTTP method. This name is mandate, and the arguments are same, like response writer and request. And you do the same thing. It doesn't return any values. So if you notice, let's check the handler func again. So the handler func is one thing which makes a function sort of other to handler. And there is also one more thing called HTTP handler, which is what this particular piece of code stands for. So this handler is an interface which has a serve HTTP, which takes a response writer and request. So in general, if you are writing an API, you can write it either with handler funcs. If it is very simple, handler funcs does the job. or you can have a structs, which is actually a handler which has a sub HTTP method. So these are the two major, these are the two methods which we generally write a particular API. So given that, so in this case, we have a DB. So I have access to the DB with healthcheck.db.ping. And in this case, I'm saying, hey, if ping is returning me an error, I'm saying service is unavailable. And then I'm writing the data service is unavailable. And then if it is not, I will write a POM. Perfect. Same extra checkers, you have a DB, you're calling ping on it. And then if the ping is not responding, you just say it's error. So we can just test it. For the testing purpose, as I said, right, like I have written a custom implementation just through return true, because in this case, we are not really bothered about actual database. So in this case, I'm creating a health checker and then I'm injecting the service, and this service has a always returns null. This is just for running purpose, but rather what we are going to do is focus on that and test it. But for the sake of completion, I'll just run it and then see what it does. My laptop is really slow. The CPU is consumed by something else, I guess.
Okay. Just to Dinesh.
Yeah.
Just to say one thing, for response writer, if you put a return statement at any time before writing, so response writer, right? It never ends, means here. If you put a w.write, writer.write any other method after return, it will never write to that stream. That's how you signal in HTTP. Means go handler signals at the end of the request. Until unless this serve HTTP method returns, it will never close the stream. Just to clarify things. A while back you said, right, it might close the ping pong example.
No, that time. Okay, I get it. I get it. Okay.
So until unless you explicitly return from that function, or that function returns implicitly, it won't close the stream.
Sure. I think I was talking about this particular thing. I wasn't unsure, because if you do this, this basically means it's 200.
Yeah. So it will first write a header.
Yeah. So the stream I was unsure of, but thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Thank you.
So I missed that. Do you have to write the header? Do you have to write the header first and then write closes the stream after it's done?
Yes. So we can go to the doc. If you write anything, it is actually considered a success. So if you want to set a specific custom header, you have to set it before. So
I see.
Yeah, Eva only.
So you always have to do a write header call first.
Yeah. Second one, line 11. If you see line 11,
yes,
the right header, this one.
Yeah. So if the write header is not called, it just assumes it's a successful response because you're writing some data to it. So if you're putting it opposite, it's going to be wrong. So you should always write the header first and then write the body.
Yeah. So
okay, I see.
Yeah. So likewise, it also mentions in the handler doc also, you see, when does this response writer ends? It's clearly mentioned. You have to means whenever this, since this service HTTP is called on over a Go routine, right? A new Go routine is spawned for every request handler. So whenever this function returns, the response writer closes the stream.
Yeah.
Do you have to do any error checking on the .write call, like to make sure it closes the stream or anything?
Write actually implements the writer interface, right? It actually returns the number of byte written and then the error. So I don't think it will return if it has means it will return an error that what has been, if there is any error writing over to a stream, I guess.
So what would you have to do if it errors out?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay.
So I think usually the usual right, it just has a, like, there's no limit on, I mean, the implementation, I guess, like as far as they are seen, like there is no issues. But a lot of times we end up having our own custom writer. The cases are probably, it's like, if you want to log the handler response codes, right? Like we generally tend to have a logging middleware. In that case, all you have is a writer and a request, but the actual status code and all wouldn't be available. So we ended up having our own custom response writer, which abstracts it, like it does the same thing, write header and everything, but it also stores the status code as part of it. If you're using Negroni, I think Negroni, oh sorry, Mux, like one of that, like it has a default one. I'm not sure, like I've been used it for a while. So in that case, it's good to check the error because your implementation could screw up with the code. But I think as far as I've used the HTTP library's default, right? We have never checked the error. But as you said, like it's good to check error and write it in case of, I mean, it's always good to handle the error and then write specific things saying, hey, writing has failed. And also, yeah, I think that is a better statement. Like when you're always doing any function call, if it has an error, like we should check it and then log it properly. Yeah. Cool. So I hope that answers. I'll move on. So in this case, again, back to the context, we are making a call to ping and then.
Oh, Dinesh, sorry to interrupt. I had one more question.
Sure, go on, sure.
So this health check struct, there's this serve HTTP method on it, and it looks like the normal handler, but it's a method. So how does the HTTP like framework? How does it know to call that?
So are you asking, hey, why does this have to be serve HTTP? Can't it be something else? Like is that okay?
Yeah, so, and also, why does it have to be a method on the struct instead of just a regular function?
Yes. So to answer that, let's go back to the server where we are actually othering or basically binding this particular struct on top of the URL. So in the handle function, what you could say is we take a URL and then we bind a particular interface. So basically in this case, and handler is a interface which has a serve HTTP method. And that is why in order to satisfy the interface, a struct have to have a method which calls serve HTTP and then which has a same argument and same types. So let's just run it with a different type. So what we did was, let's just change it to health check. Let's go to health check. And then instead of serve HTTP, I'm just going to say some HTTP. And then let's just build it and then it should fail. So yeah, as we see here, we are seeing health check as the struct. And then it's not able to bind it to handler because we are missing a method, which is serve HTTP, which we need to implement. Then only we other to the contract interface. So if you want to bind a particular handler to URL, we need to have a method called serve HTTP with these two arguments on that particular struct, and then only we can bind it because the HTTP binding function, which is the handle, expects it.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Cool. So again, I think we said what this health check is doing, make a ping call and then write internal servers unavailable in case of error. So we can just run it and see. Okay, let me just build it again. Okay, I have to change it. And then I'll just change the server code to actually return an error so that we can see, hey, something has happened. Because let's just assume the case of DB failure in this case. and then let's run it and hit it. We should get a error saying internal server error with a proper response code, status code. So this is the usual ping. Let's check the cool ping. So we see the service is unavailable because we had the code to return error rather than a nil. So in this case, we see 503. So yeah, so this is the handler. This is the service. Let's go back. And we can jump into the test now. So this was a very simple ping. Now, if you notice, I can also talk about the testify, because here, very similar thing. I have a custom struct, and then I have a ping, and then I have a mock in it. I'll step into the mock in the next step. But here, what we can do is, if you notice, the contract of testing is changed a very little bit. As in, if you could see, hey, I'm creating a new health checker with my own custom struct. And then I'm saying, okay, make a request, very similar call. And then I'm calling serve HTTP instead of calling the function directly. And then we verify, hey, assert 503 in this case. Because, yeah, this should actually return errors.error, some error, yeah. So in this case, you can also intuitively understand, right? For this particular testDB error, I need to have a struct which is actually implementing the error method. And then I'm passing it so that I can have a 503 in the response code. And then I can also check similarly, find body.string. So some available. Cool. So exactly same thing. Only thing differed is instead of calling a function, we are calling a method on the handler, which is serve HTTP, and then passing in the same contract. And then we are testing it. So let's just run the test now. Yeah, so testDB error is passing. Let's say you want to return, like, let's make this fail, right? In this case, I'm returning nil, and then I'm just running it. DB error should fail with difference. So if you notice here, like the question of why am I using testify, this gives you a nice output of a in handler test 32. I'm expecting a status code of 503, actual is 200. And then also it's giving, it gives you a difference and everything. In this case, it's not much visible, but in case of JSON, it's much more helpful and that sort of stuff. And also we can look into the mock. But anyways, so this is the test, very similar test, but rather what we focused on here was serving HTTP. We tested a handler instead of a handler func. And we are also injecting a checker, which is actually DB. So let's go a step further and then say, I need to return 503 in case of error, and then I need to return success in case of the DB ping doesn't return error. So I'll just change this. Like we can talk about the library syntax later, but this is just saying this method is called, if you passed in args, you would have passed in arg to this, but in this case, we don't have any error. And then I'm returning the error of which is in 0 syntax. I'll just tell you, like when we run it, we will understand what this is actually doing. So very similar thing, but rather than doing return nil directly, I'm just passing in a mock, and this is actually a testify mock. So this is a testify mock. The package is testify. Cool. So exactly same thing, but right now we don't have any implementation. Let's see what happens when we run the test. So yeah, in this case it panics because the library is telling us nicely, hey, I had a call called ping, but I don't know what to return because the call was unexpected. So what this means is this is a mock, and I need to set up the mock before calling it. And then we can have different test cases with different arguments and different return values. So let's just implement this quickly. So this is the syntax for it. So mock, and then what is the method which will be called? And then we can say, hey, on ping, when you call it, just say return nil. That's it. Very simple, straightforward. But in our use cases, actually for 503, so we will just return some error instead of nil. We can write the other test case in the next step. So same thing, when you call function ping on it, just return some error. Yeah, sorry, somebody had a question.
This Praveen, I had a small question. Sorry to interrupt. So, I see that in the checker struct, you are embedding the mock.mock, right?
Yep.
And in line number 12 inside the test, you're basically using the API provided by mock to say what the behavior is.
Correct.
So this is one way of defining it. So if you had to replace this with let's say if you worked with just a checker struct which did not embed the mock.mock, and you implemented the ping method which actually returned errors.new of some error.
Yeah.
How different would the output on the test be with respect to this? Like, so basically, is mock purely for convenience that you're using, or is there any other advantage that you're sort of drawing out of?
Okay, output is just part of it. Like output, I wouldn't say it's much better in terms, but rather if it takes the next step, like, hey, for different use cases, what are we going to do? So let's just come to, let's just verify it, right? Return nil, and then we don't need to mock it. And then what happens when we make a call, right? I think still we will have a decent number of, I think it would panic for like, let's just see it. Like it'll have a decent amount of error, but yeah. So we still have a servers unavailable, but actually it's Pong. In this case, it's calling a method because it's only one. So the output is not the matter, but let's say, what can I say? I can call, let's say you have 4 or 5 functions on it, and then your handler have to define or particularly call only one function. That, how will we test it, right? Like I have to record the order. I also have to record the method call. And then I have to say, hey, I shouldn't call this method. You can do it in mock, but if you're writing a custom one, it's going to be difficult to maintain the state. Or to put it other way, like let's start simple, right? Now I have this, and I want to write a test DB success. This is the other case, right? Now what will we do? We can't use this checker, right? So instead we end up writing another checker, and we can call it success checker, and then error checker, and then here we will write errors dot new, and then some error. But let's say you also want to use let's say this takes the argument time frame, and then based on the time frame it returns some other, like it's just contrived example, but rather in your business use case it actually goes like, hey, when the user ID is this, and then when the order ID is this should be the response. So the test cases, the combinations becomes higher. In this case you can still have 2, but if you have more combinations, you can imagine the number of structs becomes higher, and then you will end up writing, hey, if the argument is this, return this. So you get the point, right? Like you can't write your own custom implementation of struct for each and every test cases, but rather what this gives you is when it's called with this set of arguments, you return this argument, return value. That's it. So this reduces us to, I mean, we don't need to write any more things, but rather I can use the same checker for 100 cases.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so basically my point was like, so it's mainly used for convenience, right? So
yes.
Dinesh, do you happen to know how does mock work? Seems like magic. Do you know anything about how it works under the hood?
It is exactly similar. Like intuitively, when we say, hey, if this is the arguments, this is the return value. That is what we are saying in this particular line, right? It exactly works like that. It actually maintains a map of arguments with return values, and when you're actually calling it, it figures out which is the arguments which is closest match, and if it matches, it returns from that return value. I mean, that itself deserves a separate session. It's an awesome thing to check it. If you can see, right, expected call is whenever you say, hey, c.on, do this, it says expected call. What's actually used in is, I can say, hey, whether this method is called or not. Even it's the library can tell you, hey, you're supposed to call ping, but it's not called. So that kind of thing also, it helps. Let's also look at call. Call is the method, the string which we passed, in this case ping, and the arguments and return arguments. So if you see here, it's actually a map of method name with arguments and return argument. That's it.
Oh, okay. Really cool.
And
I didn't know this thing existed. This is amazing.
This library does amazing things. You can say, hey, I need to call ping 10 times or 2 times. And if it calls more than that, it fails. You can write test in a very perfect way so that any change in the code will make your test fail. So
wow.
that is repeatability. And optional, you can say, there is so many other things like, oh, you need to introduce wait times, all that stuff you can do it. Like the moment the function is called, do something else, all this stuff you can do it here. It's actually a very nice thing. We should definitely have it. Like we can go into the internals of it sometime.
Cool. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yep. So again, let's go back to this con.mod. So now we have this errors case, and also now we have this success case. So I'm going to say nil. And then in this case, I'm expecting 200 in the Pong. In this case, I'm expecting servers unavailable. Perfect. So let's just run it and see. This should pass. Okay, so the error is actually failing with Pio3. I think we didn't implement it. So this is the mock structure because it uses the internal functionality. So I have to say c.call dot return of error of c. It's all syntactic sugar, but ideally it's like this called is gonna return you, hey, this is the method is called, and then I can get the arguments out of it. So this is what it's doing. Whenever the function is called, it's registering and also returning the value. So yeah, we should definitely go into that some other time. It's interesting. So let's run this again. Yeah, success. We can also go and check this one thing because that is really nice because times, let's say 1, return, and then this will succeed because we are calling it only once. Yeah, so let's just go and change it to call twice. So now it should fail saying, hey, you've called twice and I don't know what to do. Yep. So it's actually failing saying, hey, I mean, ignore this. It actually tells you the argument, nearest argument, there is a registered stuff and all, which it's not visible because there's no arguments. But in this case, it says there is an unexpected method called ping. Yeah. So you can also verify whether I've called at least once. So let's just check this once. And let's just run it. In this case, it wouldn't fail, I guess. Let's just verify, but I think the response will be different. But if I add assert expectation, it'll be perfect. So handler test, I can say c.assert expectations. So this ensures, hey, you've actually called this particular thing. Let's put this before to see what happens, because we are not calling this piece of code. Okay. I need to pass on P. Yeah. Yeah. So it actually says, hey, I'm expecting one call, but there is no calls to it. So this is also a way of ensuring you might be having a particular repository call and then you have to call it multiple times. So this is really useful. So you have to have a very strict test, and then the test should fail if it changes the order or the number of times. Anyways, so this is the handler
Dinesh,
test. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I
Sure,
have to shut down the video, unfortunately, in 2 minutes because Zoom is not ideal.
Okay.
So sorry in advance about that. But yeah, if you need to do more, how about we pick this up next week from where you left off? Would that be cool?
Yeah, that's totally fine because it's the integration test. I think we are done from the code perspective. I think we gave the context on handler and handler func with one simple mock example. The integration test, we can do it next week or later point of time. Yeah.
All right, that's amazing. I'm going to put you onto the schedule also for next week. I'll put you at the beginning. Can you do maybe just a few minutes at the very beginning of next week so that we can also get the other two folks who want to present as well?
Sure. Or I'll let you know when would be the convenient time. I'll let you know later that.
Okay.
If you have any questions, like shoot me. I'll put up the code somewhere and then share the link to the code as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Dinesh. This was so amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.